Hello and welcome back to the English Globe, where we explore global topics in clear and simple English. I'm Adam, and today we begin a deep discussion on one of the most sensitive and important international issues of our time: Taiwan and the growing risk of a war between the United States and China. This is a complex issue with global consequences, and it deserves our full attention and understanding.
And I'm Julia. Thank you so much for tuning in. Before we get started, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our future episodes. Also, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from? And what's your opinion about today's topic? Let us know in the comments section. Your thoughts help create a global conversation on serious topics like this one.
Now let's begin by understanding why Taiwan matters. Many people might see it as just a small island in East Asia, but Taiwan is much more than that. It's a modern, democratic society of over 23 million people with a powerful economy and a high standard of living. Taiwan also holds a unique position in world affairs, which makes it central to tensions between China and the United States.
One reason Taiwan is so important is because of its location. It sits in a strategic position in the Western Pacific, between China, Japan, and the Philippines. This area is known as the first island chain, and it plays a major role in military planning for both the US and China. Whoever controls Taiwan could potentially control important sea routes used for trade and military movements across the region.
Beyond geography, Taiwan is also an economic powerhouse. It is home to TSMC, the world's most advanced semiconductor manufacturing company. Semiconductors are tiny electronic parts used in everything from smartphones to cars to military equipment. If a war were to break out, the global supply of these chips could be severely disrupted, affecting industries all over the world.
But Taiwan is also important for political reasons. Since the end of the Chinese Civil War in 1949, Taiwan has governed itself separately from mainland China. However, the government of the People's Republic of China in Beijing claims Taiwan as a part of its territory. On the other hand, many people in Taiwan see themselves as Taiwanese, not Chinese, and support keeping their own democratic system.
This disagreement over Taiwan's political status is at the heart of the issue. The United States officially follows the One China policy, which means it recognizes Beijing as the government of China, but it also supports Taiwan's ability to defend itself. This delicate position is called strategic ambiguity, and it aims to prevent either side from making a dangerous move.
The danger comes from the possibility that China might one day try to take Taiwan by force, and the US might respond by stepping in to defend Taiwan. This could lead to a direct conflict between two nuclear-armed superpowers. That's why many people call Taiwan the most dangerous place in the world for a potential great power war.
It's important to understand that no one really wants war, at least not publicly. War would be devastating not only for Taiwan, but also for the entire global economy. It could lead to thousands of deaths, massive economic losses, and long-term instability in the Asia-Pacific region. But the risks are real, and tensions have been rising in recent years.
There are many questions to explore. Why does China care so much about Taiwan? What role does the US play? How do the people of Taiwan feel about this situation? And is war truly likely, or is there still hope for peace? Over the next few sections, we'll look at these issues in detail, from all sides, using real facts and avoiding bias.
That's right, Julia. In today's world, we need to understand these situations clearly and think critically. Taiwan's future affects not only Asia, but also the rest of the world. So let's stay informed and try to understand what's really happening beyond headlines and politics. That's what we aim to do on the English Globe.
So stay with us as we continue this discussion. In the next section, we'll go back in time and explore the history of China-Taiwan relations. This will help us understand how this issue began and why it's still unresolved after so many decades. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more. To understand why Taiwan is such a sensitive topic, we have to go back to the early 20th century. After the fall of the Qing dynasty in 1912, China entered a long period of instability. Civil war broke out between two main forces, the nationalists, also called the Kuomintang, KMT, and the communists, led by Mao Zedong. This civil war would later shape the modern China-Taiwan divide.
The Chinese Civil War lasted for decades, but it reached its final phase after World War II. By 1949, Mao's Communist Party had gained control of most of mainland China and declared the founding of the People's Republic of China. At the same time, the defeated nationalist forces, led by Chiang Kai-shek, fled to the island of Taiwan and set up a separate government there, still calling it the Republic of China.
From that point forward, there were two rival governments both claiming to be the legitimate rulers of all China. The People's Republic of China, based in Beijing, controlled the mainland. The Republic of China, based in Taipei, controlled Taiwan and a few small islands nearby. For decades, both sides refused to recognize each other and insisted that there was only one China.
During the Cold War, many Western countries, including the United States, supported the government in Taiwan. In fact, Taiwan held the China seat at the United Nations until 1971. But that changed when the UN General Assembly passed Resolution 2758, which gave the seat to the People's Republic of China. Since then, Beijing has been recognized by most of the world as the legal government of China.
Still, Taiwan continued to operate with its own government, military, and economy. Over the years, Taiwan evolved into a democracy, holding free and fair elections, while mainland China remained a one-party communist state. This political difference widened the divide. But despite this separation, Beijing has never abandoned its claim over Taiwan and considers it a breakaway province.
China's position is based on what it calls the One China principle. According to this idea, there is only one China, and Taiwan is a part of it. Beijing strongly opposes any move by Taiwan toward independence and has warned that it will use force if necessary to prevent it. For China, reunification with Taiwan is a key national goal and a symbol of national unity.
Meanwhile, the United States follows a different approach called the One China policy. This means the US acknowledges Beijing as the government of China but does not officially recognize Chinese sovereignty over Taiwan. Instead, the US maintains unofficial relations with Taiwan and supports its ability to defend itself through arms sales and diplomatic visits.
This creates a delicate balance. The US doesn't support formal independence for Taiwan, but it also opposes any attempt by China to take the island by force. This strategy is called strategic ambiguity. It means the US doesn't clearly say whether it would defend Taiwan, hoping that uncertainty will prevent either side from making aggressive moves.
There have been several moments of high tension in the past. One major crisis happened in 1995 to 1996 when China held military exercises and launched missiles near Taiwan after the island's president visited the US. The US responded by sending aircraft carriers to the region. The situation calmed down, but it showed how quickly things could escalate between the two sides.
In recent years, tensions have returned. As Taiwan grows more confident in its democratic identity and China becomes more assertive under President Xi Jinping, the gap between the two has widened. Taiwan has also increased its international presence, while the US has strengthened its support through legislation like the Taiwan Travel Act and the Taiwan Policy Act.
Today, Taiwan is recognized by only a small number of countries as a sovereign state. Most countries under pressure from Beijing do not have formal diplomatic ties with Taipei. However, many nations maintain unofficial relationships, and Taiwan participates in international trade, development, and global supply chains as a separate economy.
This strange status, being a self-governing democracy but not widely recognized as a country, makes Taiwan a unique case in international law and diplomacy. It also increases the risks. Since there is no clear agreement about Taiwan's future, and both sides hold firm positions, the possibility of conflict remains real. And now, with growing U.S.-China rivalry, the situation has become even more dangerous.
Many Taiwanese people today were born after the Civil War and see Taiwan as their homeland, not as a part of China. Polls show that most people in Taiwan prefer the current status quo, meaning they don't want to declare independence, but they also don't want to become part of China. This view adds complexity to the situation because it reflects the will of the people.
The historical divide between China and Taiwan has grown into more than just a political disagreement. It's now about identity, freedom, security, and international norms. And while the military balance is changing, the roots of the conflict remain deeply tied to the events of 1949 and the unresolved outcome of the Chinese Civil War.
So as we can see, today's tensions are not new. They are built on decades of conflict, mistrust, and competing visions for the future. Understanding this history helps us see why the Taiwan issue is so complicated and why it continues to shape the foreign policies of both China and the United States. In this section, we take a close look at the United States and its role in Taiwan's defense. This is one of the most important and sensitive parts of the Taiwan issue. The US does not officially recognize Taiwan as a country, yet it plays a critical role in Taiwan's security. This unusual situation began in 1979 when the US switched its official recognition from Taipei to Beijing.
That switch was part of a bigger strategy during the Cold War. The United States wanted to build a better relationship with China to counterbalance the Soviet Union. But even though the U.S. stopped recognizing Taiwan as a country, it passed an important law that same year, the Taiwan Relations Act. This act remains the foundation of U.S. policy toward Taiwan today.
The Taiwan Relations Act says that the US will consider any attempt to forcefully change Taiwan's status a serious concern. It doesn't guarantee that the US will go to war to protect Taiwan, but it does say the US will help Taiwan defend itself. That includes selling weapons and maintaining the ability to respond to threats in the region.
The U.S. government has followed a policy called strategic ambiguity for more than 40 years. This means it keeps China guessing about how it would respond if an invasion of Taiwan happened. The goal is to deter both sides, to discourage Taiwan from declaring independence and to discourage China from attacking. It's a way of preventing war by being unclear.
This strategy worked for decades, but in recent years, things have started to change. The US has become more open in showing support for Taiwan. American lawmakers have visited Taiwan more frequently, and the US has approved large arms sales to help Taiwan modernize its military. These actions have angered Beijing, which sees them as interference in its internal affairs.
At the same time, China's military power has grown significantly. The People's Liberation Army, PLA, now has more ships than the U.S. Navy and has advanced missile systems that can target American bases in the region. In response, the U.S. has increased its military presence in the Indo-Pacific, strengthening alliances with countries like Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines.
The US has also pushed for new partnerships like the AU-KUS agreement with the UK and Australia. This is part of a larger effort to counterbalance China's influence. But all of this adds to tensions in the region. Beijing sees these moves as part of a strategy to contain China, while Washington sees them as necessary steps to protect peace and stability.
One key question is whether the U.S. would actually fight for Taiwan if a war broke out. The answer is still unclear. Some U.S. presidents have remained vague, but President Joe Biden has said multiple times that the U.S. would defend Taiwan if China attacked. Each time, the White House clarified that U.S. policy has not officially changed, but the statements raised international attention.
That kind of uncertainty creates both deterrence and danger. On one hand, China might think twice before launching any attack, fearing US involvement. On the other hand, miscommunication or miscalculation could lead to a sudden military confrontation. In times of crisis, even small incidents, like a military plane flying too close, can cause a large reaction.
The U.S. also faces a strategic dilemma. If it doesn't defend Taiwan, its allies in the region might lose trust in America's promises. But if it does intervene, it risks a full-scale war with another nuclear power. That kind of conflict would be devastating not only for Asia, but for the entire world. Military analysts and policymakers are deeply concerned about this possibility.
Taiwan is also important for the US economically. The island produces the most advanced semiconductors, which are critical for US technology, military, and industry. If Taiwan's semiconductor factories were destroyed or captured, it would cause massive economic problems in the US. That's another reason why protecting Taiwan is in America's interest.
But this support comes with limits. The U.S. does not support Taiwan declaring independence, and it does not have official diplomatic ties with Taiwan's government. All U.S.-Taiwan relations are handled through unofficial offices. These careful arrangements are designed to avoid crossing Beijing's red lines while still maintaining support for Taiwan's democracy.
Over the years, American support for Taiwan has increased across political lines. Democrats and Republicans both see Taiwan as a key partner in the region. Congress has passed new laws to expand military, economic, and diplomatic ties. These include the Taiwan Travel Act, the Taipei Act, and the proposed Taiwan Policy Act, which would offer even stronger support.
However, these moves have made U.S.-China relations more tense. Beijing sees them as violations of past agreements and has responded with military exercises and aggressive statements. Each time the U.S. shows support for Taiwan, China reacts with forceful words or actions. This pattern increases the risk of accidental escalation, especially during a crisis.
U.S. defense planning now includes preparing for a potential conflict over Taiwan. The Pentagon has updated its strategies, war games have been conducted, and military commanders have warned that a Chinese attack on Taiwan could happen as early as the mid-2020s. These warnings are not predictions, but they show that the issue is being taken very seriously.
Despite the rising tension, the U.S. still says that peace and dialogue are the best way forward. It urges both China and Taiwan to avoid taking unilateral steps that could raise the risk of conflict. At the same time, Washington is strengthening its own deterrence capabilities to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best.
In summary, the US plays a critical but complicated role in Taiwan's defense. It wants to prevent war, support democracy, maintain peace in Asia, and protect its own interests. But it must do all this without pushing too far or causing conflict by accident. It's a careful balancing act that becomes more difficult as tensions rise.
In the next section, we'll turn to China's perspective. We'll explore why Beijing considers Taiwan part of its territory, how Chinese leaders think about sovereignty, and why reunification is a top national goal. Understanding China's view is essential if we want to understand the full picture of this dangerous and delicate issue.
To understand the full picture of the Taiwan issue, we need to look deeply into how China views Taiwan. For the Chinese government, this is not just about foreign policy or security. It's about history, national pride, and unfinished business. Beijing considers Taiwan a core interest, meaning it is non-negotiable and central to China's national identity and political future.
The Chinese government insists that Taiwan is part of China. This position is based on the idea of historical unity. Beijing points to periods in history, especially during the Qing dynasty in the 17th and 18th centuries, when Taiwan was governed from mainland China. Although Taiwan was later under Japanese rule, China argues that sovereignty never truly changed hands.
When the People's Republic of China was founded in 1949, it declared itself the sole legitimate government of China, including Taiwan. Even though the island was under the control of the Republic of China, ROC, Beijing saw the separation as temporary. The goal of reunification has been part of the Communist Party's official policy ever since.
In 2005, China passed the anti-secession law, which states that if Taiwan were to try to separate permanently or declare formal independence, China would use non-peaceful means to prevent it. That's a clear warning. From Beijing's point of view, reunifying with Taiwan is not just an option. It is a duty that must be fulfilled sooner or later.
China also fears the idea of a Taiwan model spreading. If Taiwan becomes permanently independent and successful, it might encourage other regions within China, like Hong Kong, Tibet, or Xinjiang, to seek more autonomy or even separation. The Chinese Communist Party sees this as a threat to its territorial integrity and political control.
The issue is deeply personal for the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. For decades, the party has built its image around the idea of restoring China's pride and status after the century of humiliation, a period when foreign powers carved up China's territory. From Beijing's perspective, Taiwan represents the final piece of China's full recovery.
Under President Xi Jinping, this goal has become even more prominent. In many of his speeches, Xi has repeated that reunification with Taiwan is inevitable. He has called it a historical task and a part of what he calls the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. For Xi, Taiwan is not a side issue. It is central to his long-term legacy.
President Xi has said that China prefers peaceful reunification, but he also emphasizes that China will never renounce the use of force. In recent years, we've seen China increase military pressure on Taiwan, with regular airspace intrusions, naval patrols, and joint drills. These actions are meant to show strength and to send a message: China is serious.
Beijing also sees US involvement in Taiwan as a direct challenge to its sovereignty. Chinese officials often accuse Washington of breaking its promises under the One China policy, especially when US lawmakers visit Taiwan or when American warships sail through the Taiwan Strait. These actions are seen as interference in China's internal affairs.
Let's now take a close look at the military side of this situation. If tensions around Taiwan ever escalated into open conflict, how would that unfold? What are the strategies in place? Who has the advantage, and at what cost? These questions are crucial to understanding the real risks of war between the US and China.
That's right. To begin, China has spent the past 2 decades modernizing its military, especially the People's Liberation Army, Navy, and Air Force. According to the US Department of Defense and independent military analysts, like those at the International Institute for Strategic Studies, China now has the largest navy in the world by number of ships, though the US still holds superiority in aircraft carriers and global reach.
Yes. As of recent years, the PLA Navy has over 370 battle force ships, compared to around 295 for the US Navy. However, it's not just about numbers. The quality, experience, and technological integration matter. The US has decades of combat experience, global logistics, and alliance networks. But China is rapidly closing the gap with new submarines, destroyers, and missile systems.
On the air power side, China's Air Force has expanded its fighter and bomber fleet with aircraft like the J-20 stealth fighter and the H-6K long-range bomber, which are specifically designed for regional conflict scenarios. Taiwan, on the other hand, maintains a defensive force of around 60,000 active troops, with American support in training, intelligence, and hardware, like F-16V fighter jets and Patriot missile systems.
And here's where things get interesting. The US has a policy of strategic ambiguity, meaning it doesn't say clearly whether it would defend Taiwan militarily. However, recent U.S. administrations have increased weapons sales to Taiwan and conducted more military drills in the region, signaling strong support. Some U.S. officials, including President Biden, have even suggested the U.S. would intervene, though the White House often walks back those comments.
Let's consider the geographical challenge. Taiwan is only about 130 kilometers across the Taiwan Strait from mainland China. That gives the PLA an advantage in proximity. China could attempt an amphibious invasion, but that would be extremely difficult, even for a modern military. Taiwan has rugged coastlines, strong air defenses, and mountainous terrain, and an invasion would likely face stiff resistance and global condemnation.
Military analysts also highlight the role of missiles. China possesses thousands of short and medium-range ballistic missiles, many of which are stationed in the Eastern Theater Command opposite Taiwan. These missiles can hit U.S. bases in Japan and Guam, as well as naval forces in the Pacific. This creates a complicated web of deterrence. Neither side wants to escalate, but both are preparing for the possibility.
Yes, and the U.S. military strategy would likely rely on its aircraft carrier strike groups, long-range bombers, stealth aircraft, and submarines. Japan and Australia could also play a role, directly or indirectly, especially through intelligence sharing, logistics, and political support. Meanwhile, Taiwan continues to invest in what they call an asymmetric defense strategy, focusing on mobile missile launchers, fast attack boats, and guerrilla-style tactics.
This type of strategy is meant to make any invasion costly and time-consuming for China. In short, Taiwan's goal is not to defeat China outright, but to delay, resist, and force international intervention. If Taiwan can hold out for even a few days, global attention and possibly U.S. and allied forces might become involved, changing the balance of the conflict.
Some military simulations conducted by think tanks like the RAND Corporation and the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, show that in the event of war, both sides could suffer massive losses. Even in best-case scenarios for the US and Taiwan, hundreds of aircraft and ships could be destroyed. China might gain control of Taiwan, but only after suffering tens of thousands of casualties and serious economic damage.
Which leads to a central point. The cost of war would be catastrophic for everyone involved, not just for Taiwan, but for China, the US, Japan, and the global economy. That's one of the reasons most experts believe deterrence and diplomacy are still the most likely path forward. Even China's military strategy, as far as we know, emphasizes peaceful reunification, though backed by a growing threat of force.
We also have to remember the grey zone tactics already in use. China frequently sends aircraft into Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, ADAIZ, conducts naval patrols nearby, and uses cyber attacks, economic pressure, and disinformation. This allows them to pressure Taiwan without open conflict, a form of hybrid warfare that can escalate gradually.
The U.S. has responded with its own freedom of navigation operations, sending warships through the Taiwan Strait and increasing cooperation with allies like Japan, the Philippines, and Australia. Each of these moves is seen by China as provocative, and this increases the risk of accidental conflict. Imagine a Chinese jet colliding with a U.S. surveillance plane. History reminds us how dangerous miscalculations can be.
So to sum up this section, the military balance in the Taiwan Strait is incredibly delicate. China has proximity, growing power, and political motivation. Taiwan has determination, geography, and support from powerful friends. And the US plays a central yet cautious role. All three sides are preparing, not necessarily because they want war, but because they fear being caught unprepared.
Coming up next, we'll explore the economic consequences of a potential conflict over Taiwan. The effects wouldn't be limited to East Asia. They could reach every country that relies on global trade, especially the technology sector. But first, we'd love to know your thoughts. How do you view the military situation around Taiwan? Do you think deterrence will continue to work? Now, let's focus on the military situation. In case of any serious conflict over Taiwan, military capabilities on all sides would play a major role. China has significantly expanded its military over the past 2 decades. The People's Liberation Army, PLA, is now the largest military force in the world in terms of personnel. They've invested heavily in naval power, air defense, cyber capabilities, and missile technology.
That's right. China's missile systems, especially its medium-range ballistic missiles, could pose a serious threat to US bases in the Indo-Pacific region, including Guam and Okinawa. According to a 2023 US Department of Defense report, China has over 1,000 short and medium-range missiles that could target Taiwan or deter outside intervention in a conflict scenario. These missiles can hit their targets quickly and with high accuracy.
China's naval presence has also grown significantly. In fact, by number of warships, China now has the largest navy in the world. The PLA Navy operates modern destroyers, submarines, and even 2 aircraft carriers, with a third one, the Fujian, under testing. China's naval expansion has been specifically focused on gaining control over nearby seas and ensuring its ability to blockade or surround Taiwan if necessary.
Meanwhile, the United States maintains its position as the most technologically advanced military power in the world. The US Navy operates a global fleet with unmatched aircraft carrier strike groups, nuclear submarines, and long-range strike systems. American air superiority is still considered the gold standard, with advanced fighter jets like the F-35, F-22, and long-range bombers. The US also has strong military alliances in the region.
Those alliances include defense agreements with Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, and others. While the US has no formal treaty with Taiwan, the Taiwan Relations Act obligates the US to provide arms to Taiwan for self-defense. In the event of a conflict, how the US chooses to respond would depend on political decisions at that time, but militarily, it would be ready and capable of acting if necessary.
Speaking of Taiwan's own defenses, Taiwan has a modern but smaller military. Its focus is on asymmetric warfare. That means it invests in weapons and strategies that can help it survive and fight back effectively against a much larger opponent. For example, Taiwan has anti-ship missiles, fast attack boats, and mobile air defense systems. Its aim is to make a Chinese invasion costly and difficult.
Taiwan also maintains a mandatory military service program for young people and has been actively training for potential scenarios involving island defense and urban combat. In recent years, Taiwan has purchased new American weapon systems, including F-16V fighter jets and Patriot missile batteries. These help boost Taiwan's air defense and response capabilities in case of air or missile attacks.
But military power is not only about weapons, it's also about geography and logistics. Taiwan's mountainous terrain, dense urban cities, and narrow beaches make it a very difficult target for invasion. Experts agree that a full-scale invasion would require massive amphibious operations by China, which is one of the most difficult types of military action. Even China's military commanders know this would not be easy.
In fact, many military analysts believe that even if China could gain air and sea control over the Taiwan Strait, launching and sustaining an amphibious assault would involve enormous risk, cost, and potential failure. Logistically, China would need to move hundreds of thousands of troops, along with equipment, fuel, food, and medical supplies. Taiwan would likely resist fiercely, making any occupation extremely costly.
That's why, instead of full invasion, some analysts predict that China might choose a blockade strategy. This would involve cutting Taiwan off from international trade and pressuring the island economically and psychologically. A blockade might be less risky than invasion, but it would still be highly provocative. The US and its allies would likely respond to such a move, and it could lead to a wider military confrontation.
To summarize this section, China has made significant advances in its military strength and could pose a serious threat to Taiwan. However, the US and its allies maintain global military superiority and have the capability to respond. Taiwan is not defenseless either. It has built a defense strategy based on resilience, mobility, and technology. Any military conflict would likely be long, costly, and dangerous for all parties involved.
And that's why, despite all the military planning, many leaders on all sides still hope for a peaceful resolution. Because no matter how powerful the weapons are, the cost of war, in lives, in economies, and in stability, would be incredibly high. In the next section, we'll look at possible future scenarios and how the world might try to avoid a war.
After examining the military balance, it's important to explore the possible scenarios that could unfold in the Taiwan Strait. What might happen if tensions continue to rise? Are there paths toward peaceful resolution, or is conflict inevitable? Experts often talk about several key scenarios, each with its own risks and outcomes.
One scenario is continued status quo maintenance. This means that neither China nor Taiwan takes any major steps toward independence or reunification, and the US continues its policy of strategic ambiguity. Many analysts believe this is the most likely near-term outcome because it avoids direct conflict while allowing tensions to simmer.
However, the status quo is fragile. Small incidents, like a military aircraft flying too close or a political speech, could escalate tensions quickly. There is also a risk that domestic politics within China, Taiwan, or the US could push leaders to take harder stances, making peaceful maintenance difficult.
Another scenario involves Taiwan formally declaring independence. This would be the most provocative move from Beijing's perspective, likely triggering a strong response. The Chinese government has clearly stated it would not tolerate formal independence and might respond with military action, sanctions, or other aggressive measures.
The third scenario is a peaceful reunification agreement. This would require compromises on both sides, including guarantees for Taiwan's political and economic systems. However, recent events, including the situation in Hong Kong, have made many Taiwanese wary of such offers. Public opinion in Taiwan strongly favors maintaining the current democratic system.
There's also the possibility of a limited military conflict, perhaps a brief skirmish or blockade rather than full-scale war. This could be an attempt by China to pressure Taiwan without escalating to all-out invasion. But even a limited conflict risks becoming uncontrollable, drawing in the US and other regional powers.
On the diplomatic front, there have been ongoing efforts to reduce tensions. Track 2 diplomacy, meaning informal talks involving academics, former officials, and civil society, has tried to build communication channels. However, official diplomatic relations are limited because most countries do not formally recognize Taiwan as a sovereign state.
Economic interdependence is another factor influencing peace prospects. Taiwan and China have significant trade ties, and many global companies rely on Taiwan's semiconductor industry. A conflict would disrupt supply chains worldwide, so many businesses and governments have a vested interest in avoiding escalation.
Yet, economic ties don't guarantee peace. Political and strategic goals often outweigh economic interests in times of crisis. Nationalism and leadership decisions can push countries toward confrontation despite economic costs, as history has repeatedly shown.
International actors like the United Nations have limited ability to intervene because Taiwan is not a member state, and China holds a permanent Security Council seat with veto power. However, global public opinion, economic sanctions, and diplomatic pressure could still influence outcomes.
The US and its allies face difficult choices. Supporting Taiwan's democracy and security while avoiding war requires careful diplomacy and strong deterrence. Some experts call for clearer communication about U.S. intentions, while others warn that removing strategic ambiguity could provoke China.
Ultimately, the future of Taiwan depends on many unpredictable factors: leadership decisions, international dynamics, domestic politics, and unforeseen events. What is clear is that all parties understand the stakes are incredibly high, and war would have devastating consequences.
This makes ongoing dialogue, confidence-building measures, and careful management of military activities essential. It also means that people around the world should stay informed and understand the complexity of the Taiwan issue beyond headlines and political rhetoric.
As we continue this series, we'll examine the economic impacts of a potential conflict, Taiwan's domestic politics, and international efforts to maintain peace. Understanding these layers helps us better grasp the risks and the hopes for stability in this crucial region.
When discussing the Taiwan situation, one critical aspect often overlooked is the economic impact of any conflict in the region. Taiwan plays a major role in the global supply chain, especially in the technology sector. Its semiconductor industry, in particular, is vital to many modern industries worldwide, including smartphones, cars, and military equipment.
Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing giant, TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, produces over 50% of the world's advanced microchips. These chips are essential components in electronics, computing, and defense. A disruption in Taiwan's chip production would cause serious ripple effects globally, impacting everything from consumer electronics to national security.
A conflict that disrupts Taiwan's economy could trigger a global technology crisis. Countries and companies worldwide depend on a steady supply of chips. For example, automakers already faced shortages during the COVID-19 pandemic, which slowed production and sales. A war or blockade affecting Taiwan would worsen such shortages, damaging economies everywhere.
Moreover, Taiwan is a significant player in other industries like chemicals, machinery, and precision instruments. Trade between Taiwan and China itself is extensive, with billions of dollars exchanged annually. Despite political tensions, economic ties remain strong, creating a complicated interdependence that makes conflict costly on many levels.
If a conflict erupts, international trade routes would also be affected. The Taiwan Strait is one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. A blockade or military action could halt maritime traffic, delaying goods and energy supplies to East Asia and beyond. This would increase shipping costs and create shortages in multiple sectors globally.
The global economy today is highly interconnected. China is the world's second-largest economy. Taiwan is a key manufacturing hub, and the US is a major consumer market. A conflict in the Taiwan Strait could lead to global economic instability, stock market volatility, and disrupted investment flows.
Sanctions and counter-sanctions would likely follow any conflict. Countries supporting Taiwan might impose economic penalties on China, and China could retaliate. These measures would hurt businesses and consumers worldwide, increase inflation, and slow global growth.
Energy markets would also be affected. East Asia relies heavily on imported oil and gas transported by sea. Any disruption in shipping lanes would push energy prices higher. Countries might face energy shortages, which would further strain their economies and daily lives.
Beyond immediate economic disruption, a conflict would also damage investor confidence. Uncertainty about security in the region could cause companies to delay investments or move production out of Asia. This could slow innovation and reduce economic growth in key industries over the long term.
Governments around the world are aware of these risks. Many have started to consider how to reduce dependence on Taiwan's semiconductor industry by investing in domestic manufacturing. The US, Europe, and Japan have announced initiatives to build chip factories locally, but these efforts will take years to impact supply chains.
However, it's nearly impossible to replace Taiwan's advanced chip manufacturing quickly. The industry requires highly specialized equipment, skilled labor, and a complex ecosystem. Any disruption to Taiwan's production would be felt for years, underlining Taiwan's importance to global stability.
In addition to economic costs, human costs in a conflict would be devastating. Taiwan has a population of over 23 million people, and a war would put millions at risk. Refugee crises, infrastructure destruction, and long-term economic hardship would follow.
So, the economic stakes in Taiwan go beyond regional politics. They touch on global technology, trade, energy, and financial systems. This is why many countries push for peaceful dialogue and stability, recognizing that the costs of war would be enormous for everyone.
As the global economy grows more complex, the Taiwan issue reminds us how interconnected the world has become. Problems in one small island can affect people everywhere, reinforcing the need for cooperation and peaceful resolution in international relations.
In the next section, we'll explore Taiwan's own domestic politics and society, how its people view their future, the role of democracy, and what challenges Taiwan faces internally while the external threats grow. As we've discussed the international military and economic implications, it's equally important to understand the situation inside Taiwan itself. Taiwan is a vibrant democracy with over 23 million people. Its domestic politics and public opinion play a huge role in shaping the island's future and its relations with China and the world.
Taiwan's political system is a multi-party democracy with regular elections. Since the 1990s, Taiwan has transformed from an authoritarian regime to one of Asia's most dynamic democracies. The people actively participate in elections, and political debates about Taiwan's identity and future happen openly.
One major political divide in Taiwan is over the question of its relationship with China. Some parties support maintaining the current status quo, others lean toward eventual reunification, while the pro-independence camp pushes for formal recognition as a sovereign state. The Democratic Progressive Party, DPP, currently in power, generally favors greater distance from China.
Public opinion polls consistently show that most Taiwanese prefer to maintain the status quo, neither declaring formal independence nor accepting reunification under Beijing's terms. The population values its democracy, freedoms, and way of life. Many Taiwanese identify primarily as Taiwanese rather than Chinese, reflecting a distinct national identity.
Taiwan's youth tend to be even more supportive of a separate identity, influenced by education, media, and their experiences growing up in a democratic society. This generational shift has important implications for Taiwan's politics and its relations with China, which continues to insist on reunification.
However, Taiwan faces internal challenges as well. Economic inequality, housing affordability, and an aging population are pressing concerns. These domestic issues impact political debates and government priorities. The island's leaders must balance managing external security threats with addressing the everyday needs of their citizens.
The COVID-19 pandemic also affected Taiwan, testing its healthcare system and government responsiveness. Despite these challenges, Taiwan's handling of the pandemic has been praised globally for its effectiveness. This success has reinforced trust in democratic governance and institutional capacity.
Taiwanese society also actively debates issues related to cross-strait relations. There are voices advocating engagement and economic cooperation with China, hoping to reduce tensions and build mutual benefits. Others argue for strengthening defense and international partnerships to counter Chinese pressure.
In recent years, Taiwan has sought to expand its diplomatic space internationally, though Beijing's influence limits official recognition by many countries. Taiwan participates in some international organizations under restricted names or observer status, but remains excluded from bodies like the United Nations.
the island's government continues efforts to diversify its international partnerships and strengthen ties with countries like the US, Japan, and members of the European Union. This international outreach is part of Taiwan's strategy to secure support for its security and economic development.
Civil society in Taiwan is vibrant and active. Media freedom is robust, and public protests are common. This openness contrasts sharply with China's political system, where dissent is tightly controlled. Taiwan's democratic values are a source of pride and a key reason for resistance to Beijing's reunification proposals.
It's important to recognize that Taiwanese people face difficult choices. The desire to protect their freedoms and democracy often conflicts with fears of provoking conflict with China. This tension creates a complex political environment where leaders must navigate carefully.
Overall, Taiwan's domestic politics and society are central to understanding the broader Taiwan issue. The island's vibrant democracy, strong identity, and internal debates shape its responses to external pressures and the evolving geopolitical landscape.
In the final section of this series, we'll explore international efforts to maintain peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, and what the future might hold for this critical region in the coming years.
As we continue our deep dive, let's shift to a domain that's often overlooked in traditional war talk: cyber and technological warfare. Julia, in today's world, the battlefield isn't just about troops and missiles. It's also about satellites, semiconductor chips, AI systems, and digital infrastructure. In the case of US-China-Taiwan tensions, how significant is this non-traditional battlefield?
Very significant, Adam. In fact, many believe the first shots in a potential conflict over Taiwan wouldn't come from guns or missiles, but through cyber attacks. Taiwan is already on the front line of this digital war. Its government agencies, infrastructure, and even media are frequently targeted by cyber operations suspected to be linked to China. These attacks aim to destabilize, spread disinformation, and weaken morale.
And it's not just Taiwan. The US has reported major cyber intrusions into defense networks, energy infrastructure, and private companies, many traced back to Chinese-linked hacker groups. The US Cyber Command has strengthened its posture in recent years, conducting so-called hunt-forward missions, where US cyber teams operate inside partner nations to detect and deter hostile intrusions. Taiwan has become a key testing ground for this strategy.
Exactly. Taiwan is seen by cybersecurity experts as a canary in the coal mine. If a serious kinetic conflict were to break out, we could expect a wave of cyber attacks designed to cripple communications, shut down banking systems, or paralyze airports and hospitals. That would happen before any traditional military strike. It's digital warfare, and it's already happening in the shadows.
Then there's the semiconductor issue. Taiwan is home to TSMC, the world's most advanced chip maker. Their fabrication plants produce chips for everything: smartphones, cars, fighter jets. The world depends on them, and that makes Taiwan strategically invaluable. The US has realized this and is trying to bring chip production back home. China, on the other hand, is racing to become self-sufficient in chip technology, but it still lags behind.
That dependence makes Taiwan not just a geopolitical issue, but a tech security choke point. If Taiwan were to fall into conflict or its chip supply disrupted, the global economy would be thrown into chaos. That's why the US passed the CHIPS Act, investing billions in American chip manufacturing. But replacing Taiwan's advanced chip-making capacity is not something that can happen quickly or easily.
Meanwhile, China has been accused of intellectual property theft in tech and defense sectors, particularly from US firms. The US has responded with sanctions, blacklists, and tighter controls on the export of advanced semiconductor tools to China. These moves are not just economic, they are deeply strategic. Washington wants to limit Beijing's ability to develop next-gen military tech, including hypersonic weapons, AI, and cyber capabilities.
Let's also mention AI and quantum computing, which are seen as the next frontier in warfare and intelligence. Both the US and China are pouring massive investments into these technologies. Whoever leads in AI might dominate intelligence gathering, battlefield decision-making, and even cyber defenses. Taiwan's universities and firms are quietly contributing to this race as well, making it a hub of innovation that's vulnerable in a future conflict.
There's even concern among Western intelligence communities that a Chinese invasion of Taiwan might include not only physical occupation, but also information blackouts, mass surveillance, and algorithmic control. Beijing has already built such systems domestically. Exporting that control to Taiwan could be a chilling aspect of any annexation strategy. The tools are not just bombs, they're bits and code.
Yes, and this leads us to a broader question. How prepared are democratic systems like Taiwan and the US to defend their cyber frontiers without undermining civil liberties? That's a tightrope walk. Enhancing digital defense often means more surveillance, stricter controls, and faster response mechanisms. But how do you balance that with democratic transparency and privacy? That debate is still evolving.
It's also worth pointing out that while cyber warfare may seem less violent, its impact can be equally devastating. A well-timed cyber attack on an electric grid, water supply system, or banking institution could cause panic and chaos, especially in a densely populated place like Taiwan. Cyber warfare is asymmetric, often anonymous, and hard to deter because attribution is difficult.
And that's what makes it so dangerous. Unlike traditional weapons, which are visible and regulated by international law, cyber tools are invisible and unregulated. There's no Cyber Geneva Convention. That lack of global rules makes this space a wild west, where escalation can be rapid, misinterpretations are common, and retaliation can spiral into something much worse.
So to summarize, while tanks and planes get the headlines, the real war, if it ever comes, might start in silence. It might begin with a keystroke, a blackout, a viral misinformation campaign, or a chip shortage. In many ways, the future of Taiwan may hinge not only on who controls the sea or the sky, but who dominates the server and the silicon.
A powerful insight to close this section. The Taiwan crisis is no longer just a 20th century problem of sovereignty and borders. It's a 21st century challenge of technology, networks, and narrative control. And in that arena, the line between peace and conflict has never been thinner or more dangerous.
As we reach the final part of this series, it's important to focus on the international efforts aimed at maintaining peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. The situation is complex and sensitive, requiring diplomacy, strategic balance, and cooperation among many global actors.
Indeed, the United States plays a central role in these efforts through its policy of strategic ambiguity, alliances, and diplomatic engagement. While officially recognizing the One China policy, the US continues to provide Taiwan with defensive arms and promotes peace through deterrence.
Other regional powers also influence the balance. Japan, South Korea, Australia, and members of ASEAN have vested interests in preventing conflict. Many have increased military cooperation and economic ties with Taiwan and the US to promote regional stability.
International organizations, although limited by China's influence, encourage peaceful dialogue and conflict resolution. Countries often support Taiwan's participation in global health, trade, and environmental initiatives, emphasizing cooperation over confrontation.
Multilateral forums, such as the Quad, consisting of the US, Japan, India, and Australia, also focus on promoting a free and open Indo-Pacific, which indirectly supports Taiwan's security by encouraging rules-based order and discouraging coercion.
Efforts in diplomacy emphasize communication channels to avoid misunderstandings and accidental conflict. Confidence-building measures, military transparency, and crisis management protocols are crucial to reducing risks in this tense environment.
At the same time, there are calls for clearer communication regarding U.S. commitments to Taiwan. Some argue that reducing strategic ambiguity could deter aggression by signaling firm support, while others worry it might escalate tensions unnecessarily.
The international community faces difficult challenges, balancing support for Taiwan's democracy and security with the desire to maintain stable relations with China, the world's second-largest economy. Navigating this requires nuanced and patient diplomacy.
Looking ahead, many experts agree that the future depends on leadership choices, regional cooperation, and the willingness of all parties to pursue peaceful solutions. War remains a worst-case scenario with devastating consequences.
Technological and economic interdependence may serve as a powerful deterrent against conflict. Global supply chains, trade, and financial markets create incentives for peace and stability, though they are not guarantees.
Taiwan's resilience and democracy, combined with international support, have created a unique situation in global politics. The world watches closely as the island balances external pressures with internal unity.
As listeners, staying informed and understanding the complexity of this issue helps us appreciate the delicate balance maintaining peace in the Taiwan Strait. The path ahead requires cooperation, respect, and ongoing dialogue.
Thank you for joining us throughout this series. We hope this discussion has shed light on the multifaceted risks and realities surrounding Taiwan and the U.S.-China relationship. Please share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear where you're listening from and your opinions on this important topic.
Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the English Globe for more in-depth discussions on global issues. Together, we can explore and understand the world better.